Production. It's not starting. Welcome to another production of Political Woodstock, Peace, Love, and Politics. So today we're going to go down a sad story, sad happening, and resilience. Now, when I was younger and had more of a waist, I used to live in the back of this home. And the lady's name was Mrs. Nancy Busey, B-U-C-Y. She was born in the state of Oklahoma in, I believe it was 1905. It had not yet become a state. Her family was in oil. Later, she became a baby nurse, one who took care of, like a nanny. They would call her a nanny more. But back then they called someone that was a little bit more specific a baby nurse, but that really doesn't matter. In World War I, Tulsa, Oklahoma, played a pivotal part in the winning of the First World War. They supplied 2/3 of the oil to the Allies in World War I. I mean, to all of them. So there was a lot of money in Tulsa, so much so that they were the richest city in the world. We're talking about the city of dreams. You could really make it there, with a little hard work. And there was a place for everyone. And in Greenwood or Black Wall Street, depends on whatever name you want to use, it was highly affluent. Between Greenwood, Archer, and Pine. Oh, it's sad. It's just... I thought I could talk about this and just be factual. But, for instance, there's only 2 airports in the whole state of Oklahoma. Talking about the late teens, early 20s. And in Greenwood, 6 families owned planes. That does not include the Native Americans, the Osage tribe, that owned a lot of planes. And I think some of them lived in the Greenwood area. So I don't know if that's including them. It was segregated. It was African American, and I believe Native American had to live in this area of, the 3 points, Pine, Archer, and Greenwood. I need to put my glasses on. So, Mrs. Busey, she would go up to Barnesville, Oklahoma, which was the headquarters of Phillips Petroleum. And she told me some inflammatory things. She would play the organ if there was a wake. If they had an organ in the home, or piano, she would be asked to play it. Well, she said, often when she played the piano or organ, that the Klan members, Mrs. Busey was white, the Klan members would come in and around the casket, go around it 3 times counterclockwise. This was one of their rituals. And she thought that the Klan were good people, except for that thing that happened, that terrible, awful thing, she would say. She had a fear. I don't know where this fear came from. And I do believe possibly that it was because of a child that she gave birth to. A child that was crying so in a healthy way, then all of a sudden was stopped. She was afraid to go underneath a bridge that some man would get her. And she's in her 80s, 90s when she's telling me these things. So, I really couldn't change or influence the way she thought. I find a lot of women in the Klan have fear-based beliefs. I find that sad. So she's telling me all these stories, here and there. I would cook for her, mind you. Yeah, she was an elder, and it's easier to cook for 2 than 1. And she would tell me all these stories, especially about the Phillips family, who apparently, from her tale of it, were Klan. And then she started to talk about the massacre. Now, she called it a race riot. But honestly, I don't get it. It was so affluent. There wasn't any anger about a wealth gap. Matter of fact, if you looked at their hourly rate, which was somewhere between $14 and $16 per hour, it's much higher than what we have today. I mean, the wealth, there was an opera house, there was a stock exchange, there was just so much to do and enjoy. They had a high quality of wealth, so much so that most of the domestic servants, they were for that area, for people of color. I mean, I just wish people knew how wealthy Tulsa, Greenwood, Black Wall Street, how much wealth there was, how much greed there was. The Klan was highly active in the 1920s and 19-teens. Well, I guess till the 50s. There was a young man who was a homosexual, gay, since it's Pride Month. And I believe it was 1920. He got caught with a man, I don't know the shade of humanity that person was, but the Klan got him, took him out, and they whipped him so severely that even his penis was sliced. The brutality of the time. They treated their animals better than, if it was a white person, they treated their animals better than people of color. I couldn't imagine. But when I do think about it, I get angry. So let's talk about Mrs. Busey. She was a baby nurse and she worked at Philbrook. I think it was for the grandchildren. I can't remember. But she walked to the Arkansas River and she saw, this is how she described to me, trucks. And she said they were work trucks, that they had slats up the sides. And that these trucks, she said, carried bodies. And from the way she described it, that they were stiff. And that they threw them over just like wood. So that Arkansas River, if you're in Tulsa and you look at it, contains so much more. And she watched truck after truck come to the river. I think it was on some bridge, I don't know. But she told me about that, and then she gone on home. And mind you, she was born in 1905, 1906. So she was fairly young, like 15, 17. And I remember looking at her birth certificate, and it said Indian Territory. So, this massacre, they had planes that dropped kerosene bombs on top of the buildings. The buildings would burn from the top down. They set up machine guns on top of the buildings that were not bombed. And they would shoot down the citizens of Tulsa, the black citizens of Tulsa. I don't understand. And they hid this for so long. And after the massacre, they would pass city ordinances saying that you could not build a business on land that had been burned. Meaning just that specific area. You couldn't even rebuild your business. the insurance didn't pay. The wealth in this area, it would have been hundreds of millions of dollars, if not close to $1 billion in today's currency. And I don't have the right number, but it was one of the most affluent areas in the world, not just the nation, but the world. And it lasted for 2-3 days, and they would take pictures of, they use a different term for that part of Tulsa, and say it was burning. This was during the time where they would make postcards of lynchings. But I wish they'd tell the whole story. The whole story. Because I don't think people understand the destruction. The severity of the destruction. Not just monetary, or the land, or the businesses, but for generations. It was a system of fear if anyone dared stay behind, if they did. They had a holding area off of 11th Street. My mother's friend had a house built there, and she let it go because of the stairway that she let the city take it. But it was this area where they kept, I can't even say it. Maybe I'll just delete this. It's too hard to discuss. But it's instilled a legacy in Tulsa that still exists today. They're still trying to rebuild Greenwood. They put a highway right through the middle of it. And then, of course, some of the city leadership bought up parts of that land. Just bought it up. And I could say more, but I probably shouldn't. See, even I'm fearful. I didn't grow up in Tulsa, but I spent a great portion of my life there. Tulsa was always the big city to go to. I lived in a smaller city outside of Tulsa. So, I don't know. I really hope they get to rebuild it. I hope there's reparations. They've been trying to get reparations since the 60s, I think, where they had a formal organization that was trying to get money for, I guess, crimes against humanity. What else do you call that? You know, the sheriff department, which led a lot of this, they would deputize to strangers or young boys. It hasn't changed that much since 1921. 1921 was the year of the Red Summer, where blood ran in the streets of many different cities, not just Tulsa. But Tulsa was the worst. There is I believe she was a teacher, or was she a nurse? No, she was a teacher, and I'm sorry I don't remember her name. Maybe I'll do a follow-up. She wrote about her experiences. Oh, it's so well written and inspiring and just wow. And I think someone bought the rights to it, and there's a book that you can buy. Or maybe ask your local library to purchase, so that many people can enjoy it. You can do that in most libraries. If there's a book you want to read, you can request that they purchase it. May not happen right away, but I'm deflecting because this is a very uncomfortable topic to talk about. So Mrs. Busey, she remained friends with the Phillips family. There was a lot of drinking in that family. A lot of drinking. And a lot of clan. So I'm trying to be careful. And this is what I discovered through Nancy Busey. Her recollections her telling of this family. A lot of the big oil companies, the CEOs, the presidents, whatever term they had, they were Klan too. Of course, in order to get anything done, you had to be a member if you're at a certain level. So I don't have anybody here asking questions, so it's kind of hard to know. Let me see, how long have I been going? Oh, that's not very long at all. But I think I might cut it off right here, because I'm sure I've messed something up. And there is Mount Vernon Church. It rebuilt. The basement was intact. A lot of the homes, the basements were intact. Like, they'd have a full basement, and they would cover up the basement, and they would live in the basement until they could rebuild their home. Not easy to do. Not easy to do. But Oklahoma was a state of the old, wild, bad West. Nothing good about it. And we could talk about the Osage Murders, where in the Osage Nation, they would have a head right. And part of that head right included mineral rights, oil rights. And at the time, they didn't think the mineral rights were any good in that area, where there was a lot of oil. And so a white man would, say, marry an Osage woman that had head rights, these oil rights. And these were worth millions and millions of dollars. Again, the oil, right? And if they'd been married for a short while, sometimes just 6 months, they would make a will where everything's left to the husband, and then someone would plant a bomb. And maybe if they'd been married longer, they had children, and it was just blown up, and everything was left to that white husband. This is the type of atmosphere where it really was white supremacy, and it was ugly. And it still kind of is that way in Tulsa. The way people act. So I hope this encourages you to learn more about Black Wall Street, Greenwood, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There's the Watchmen, which in the beginning of the season, they talk about the Tulsa Race Riot. And some of the images you see in that series are based on pictures of the Tulsa Massacre. I shouldn't have said race riot. But they weren't fighting. They were just trying to live. And most of them walked away, if they had shoes on, with whatever clothes they were wearing. And that was it. They lost everything. I think I'm going to do this over again. This is not good. All right, I'll be back.